and welcome to Crime in Court. This is the ninth day of trial testimony recap for the trial of Richard Allen in Indiana versus Richard Allen. We are covering. Obviously, Judge Gull has eliminated the ability for anyone to view or see or hear this unless you are in the courthouse physically when trial is taking place because there are no cameras, no audio, no transcript. So we are relying heavily on boots on the ground reporting. So let's just get started. I've been giving you guys updates from different perspectives and I try to switch it up. Let's get started. All right. And if you don't mind, please hit that like button. All right, so we're going to start off with wishtv.com. They have been doing a live blog, so it's easy to stay afloat with what's going on. So this was day 9 in the Delphi trial. Suspect Richard Allen begins Monday morning at the Carroll County Courthouse in Delphi. Allen, 52, is charged with homicide while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping in the loss of life of the 13-year-old Abby Williams and the 14-year-old Libby German. The girls' bodies were found near the Monon High Bridge near Delphi on February 14th, 2017, a day after they went missing. Allen was first investigated in 2017. Actually, I'm going to correct that. He wasn't investigated. I mean, technically not, and he wasn't a target of investigation. He came in to provide a tip, and in that conversation with law enforcement, they cleared him. So I don't know if you want to say he was first investigated, but he was cleared. He spoke with law enforcement in 2017 and was cleared. And then again in October 2022, he spoke with law enforcement, and this is when he was arrested. So after a second police interview, he was taken into custody. The trial began October 18th and was expected to continue through mid-November. Originally, 16 Allen County residents. Well, we don't know if it's going to go to mid-November now because I feel like the state's case is pretty much dead at this point. Like there's been no ties to him, the crime scene, nothing. Like no DNA, nothing that ties him to the girls. No data, no electronic data. All right, so Allen County residents sat as the jury on the case, but one juror was dismissed on October 25th. We talked about that. Someone said that they had health problems or something. Day 9 of the Delphi case was set to begin. The trial was set to begin 9 a.m. Monday. So here we go. Why is this? This is all like in reverse, right? Okay, we gotta read it bottom up, I believe. Yeah, okay, here we go. I don't know why they did that. All right, so 9 a.m. court begins for Monday session. News 8's Kyla Russell is back in Delphi for continuing coverage of the double homicide trial of Richard Allen. Follow her on X for photos, recaps, and more. Court began at 9:01 a.m. Judge Gull says the jury had family time on Saturday and had access to their devices. So the jury has been sequestered this whole time, and this is now the second weekend that they've had away from their families, but they were given some family time. Whether that's in person or over the phone, I'm not really sure. It doesn't say, but they had access to their devices, so they probably were able to call their family members. All right, so at 9:07 a.m., prosecution attorney James Luttrell began direct examination of an ISB, I assume that's like Indiana Special something or other, forensic scientist Stacy Bozanovsky. Bozanovsky specializes in paternity or kinship analysis. Okay. That's just odd to me because remember we heard from it just sticks out to me because Holman made a comment that the testing of the casing that was found at the scene, the shell casing, was as accurate as a paternity test. And now we've got a paternity type expert doing DNA analysis of a homicide scene, which makes no sense to me, but okay, let's continue. Ozanovsky tells the jury that the ISP lab is a nationally accredited team of experts. She describes the lab's testing and quality assurance processes. She described DNA to the jury, how it functions, and where it can be found in bodily fluids. I would be so bored during all of that because it's like, okay, I know a lot of this, and some of it's the too technical stuff. I whoosh over my head. So give me the lowdown, real high level, and make it make sense. Ozanovsky tells the jury that DNA can also be found in hair and skin cells, but that it is most rich in blood and saliva. She says that DNA cannot be tested to see when it was deposited. There's no aging, no test to determine age or um, how long something has been somewhere. So she describes to the jury the steps involved in testing for DNA and describes single source DNA and mixture DNA, which is when two profiles are mixed. She describes a report, or two or more, I should say, two or more profiles can be mixed. She describes a report she made in March of 2017 and her testing of two Indiana SA evidence kits. Woznowski tells the jury the details of how the kits were performed on both Libby and Abby. She tells the jury there was no seminal fluid detected and that the kits mostly excluded male NDA, with the exception of one set of swabs and a fingernail scraping kit from each girl. I don't know if that was supposed to be DNA, I'm assuming. Um, so this is interesting, and keep this in mind because I'm hearing reports that there was seminal fluid that was detected, but no male DNA, which makes no sense to me, but that's what we're being told and from other creators that were there. So she told the jury the kits suggested a presence of male DNA, but was insufficient to further analysis. So there is male DNA, but not enough to create a profile? Is that what they're saying? Not it's insufficient for further analysis. She concluded that there was no male DNA or there was insufficient male DNA for further analysis. So either none or not enough. Okay. Ozanovsky tells the jury that at the time they were not performing confirmation tests and that it was a choice to preserve DNA material. Further results of DNA testing on cervical swabs of the girls showed no male DNA evidence. She told the jury that the amounts of DNA detected wasn't necessarily unusual. She said, this is crazy to me, that it's not unusual to have male DNA on vaginal swabs. Makes no sense to me, but okay. Spozovsky told the jury that genital swabs showed a very small amount of DNA and that she wouldn't be surprised if it came from clothing or previous contact. Previous contact? They're 13 and 14. They shouldn't have had previous contact. Like this is baffling that the state was just like, well, there was some male DNA in their vaginal swabs, but let's just ignore that. It's not enough. Let's not worry about it. What? I'm worried about it. Sorry. Wazanovsky described the testing of several other swabs introduced into evidence, several from Abby and Libby and some from trees. Remember, we talked about the F tree. In all cases, she said zero or small amounts of male DNA was found, but they did exclude Richard Allen from that, all of those samples, which they left out. Maybe it's up here in the next section. Where is it? Okay, so they had a break. We come back at 12:48 p.m. DNA expert continues her testimony. At 11:10 a.m., court is back in session. Stacy Bozanovsky, a DNA expert for the Indiana State Police, is on the stand. Bozanovsky is looking at exhibits and describing what is seen. She is looking at three exhibits: a pink shirt, a gray bra, and a black bra. Bozanovsky points out blood on the pink shirt and tells the jury that the gray bra and the black bra have possible blood on them. She tells the jury that there were two strands of hair on the shirt, one was from Abby, and the other strand did not have enough DNA to identify it. Was there like descriptions of this hair? Do we know? Like you can visually compare it besides just getting DNA from it. So what hair, let's describe this hair that they found that they seem to think is not necessary to describe because there was no DNA in it. Okay. Usually you do have to have a root to get to extract the full DNA profile or to get a good DNA profile, but that doesn't mean you can't do some kind of visual comparison and make notes, but maybe they did that, but they're not telling us in this article. I don't know. So the gray bra also did not have enough DNA to be conclusive, but they said it had possible male DNA on it, or just possible blood. All right, so Bozomnosky tells the jury the black bra had four strands of hair and none of them had enough DNA to be conclusive. Again, they probably didn't have roots, but again, you could still do a visual comparison. The prosecution shows Bozovsky, and how did they know the Abbey hair was that? Did that have a root? Like they have one hair that matches Abby's hair, but all these other hairs that don't have DNA. So are we going to just say they don't matter? Prosecution shows Bozovsky a black Nike shoe that was found under Abby's back. She tells the jury there is a hair on the shoe which could be from an animal, so like a maybe one of their pets or a pet from a perpetrator. She tells the jury the blood on the shoe was partially Abby's, but the rest of the blood needed more analysis. Well, then analyze it. What's the problem? The prosecution shows the jury blood swabs from around the area where the bodies were found, specifically from the ground and the tree, the F tree. Five of the swabs were Libby's blood from the ground, and two were from Abby. More swabs were shown to the jury that had blood from Libby's index finger and pinky. How do we know it was from her index finger and pinky? The state shows the jury more clothing, including a sweatshirt, two socks, a green head scarf. We'll talk more about that green scarf, a tank top shirt, the other black Nike shoe, a pair of jeans, and a tie-dyed shirt, all recovered from the creek. Bozognovsky tells the jury the items from the creek impacted her analysis because the samples had degraded and DNA was partially removed. So she wasn't able to get a good sample from the clothing that was in the creek. But what about the clothing that Abby was wearing? She tells the jury the Nike shoe was heavily soiled but contained no blood or seminal fluid. Only one swab was only one swab had DNA and it was determined to be Abby's. The pair of jeans from the creek had two swabs done, found to be mostly Abby's DNA and a small amount of Libby's DNA on it. So those were likely Abby's jeans, I'm assuming, because didn't they? Well, we don't know if she has for sure Abby's pants on, but maybe they'll tell us. Bozomnosky tells the jury the tie-dyed shirt from the creek had many mud stains, but no blood or seminal fluid. It had one hair strand on it, but it did not have enough DNA on it to determine its source. She said the sweatshirt from the creek was cleaner than the other items in the creek, but no blood or seminal fluid was on it, so DNA could not be determined. On the pair of underwear found in the creek, she tells the jury there was no blood or seminal fluid found. Bozovsky told the jury that she took swabs from the crotch area. Those swabs showed Abby's DNA. So it was Abby's underwear, most likely in the creek. Uh, the, she then tells the jury the underwear were stained but not by blood. Okay. Bozovsky tells the jury that the black sock from the creek had no blood or seminal fluid, and she could not determine who the socks belonged to. Bozovsky tells the jury that the pink sock found in the creek also had no blood or seminal fluid on it and had three hair strands on it, but she could not determine who they belonged to. She told the jury that the green scarf from the creek may not have been related to the timing of the crime. May not have been related to the timing of the crime. That's a weird way to say if she thinks it's not related to the scene. She says there is no DNA on it. Bazivnovsky tells the jury the tank top had no blood or seminal fluid. A swab was taken but could not determine DNA. The prosecution references on April 11th, 2017, DNA report that re-evaluated a black hooded sweatshirt and a swab from an iPhone. The jury is told the swab from the iPhone showed no blood and they could not make conclusions from the DNA. Bozovsky tells the jury that 22 swabs were taken off the hooded sweatshirt, 22 swabs, trying to avoid the blood. She says the first swab was consistent with an unknown male. There is an unknown male. An unknown male's DNA profile found on the sweatshirt that Abby was wearing. Or no, this is the black hooded sweatshirt from the creek. Yeah, the black sweatshirt from the creek. Later tests showed the DNA came from a person who worked in the forensics lab. Oh, so we've got some contamination going on in the lab, potentially there. The other swabs on the hooded sweatshirt showed DNA mostly from Libby and Abby. Bozovsky told the jury I found more DNA on the sweatshirt, but that she could not determine the profile. She says laundry mixes DNA profiles. So it could have been potentially a family member's DNA. The prosecution asks Bozovsky about the July 11th, 2017 report on swabs from tree branches. She tells the jury these were done at the ISP post in Lafayette, Indiana. She says she converted a conference room into an exam room there. She tells the jury she examined branches for blood and skin cells and took several swabs and did lab testing at her main office. But we were told by law enforcement that there was no evidentiary value from those branches, so they weren't collected until several days later. Bozovsky said she found most of the branches did not have conclusive DNA and that two swabs tested positive for Libby's blood profile. Maybe if you tested them sooner and collected them sooner instead of leaving them to the elements, you might have gotten something. Bozovsky told the jury how difficult it was to get swabs and recover DNA from the creek and says the challenge of testing hair was that it needs to have a skin tag at the root and that natural shedding doesn't have much of a possibility of DNA testing. So when you just naturally shed your hair, it doesn't often come with the root, but possibly, occasionally it might, but more so if you like pull the hair out, you might get a root, more likely. All right, so she told the jury she did send a sample of human hair to the FBI that consisted of 72 hairs. The FBI, what 72 hairs are we testing here? The FBI told Bozovsky that three of the hairs were not consistent with Libby or Abby. She told the jury she chose not to test using rootless hair testing as there was not enough hairs to even send, and there was a low success rate for that testing, so she just didn't even bother. Bozovsky tells the jury that a momentary moment of touch does not necessarily mean there is touch DNA, that touching evidence is more limited contact while handling evidence leads to more contact. What? She says blood is always going to be a better source of DNA than touch DNA. The prosecution asked Bozanovsky, "Did you find the DNA of Richard Allen on the DNA sample submitted to you?" She replies, "No, she did not even create a male profile for any of the DNA." So basically, they're trying to say, well, we just didn't have enough DNA, so obviously it must be his, but we just didn't have the ability to test it because there just wasn't enough. But we want you to think it was his. Okay. Gull tells the gallery, says that she has noticed members. Okay, so Gull says that she has noticed members of the gallery sleeping in the room, and she says that she would appreciate if people stopped. She said something along the lines like, I don't conduct court in your bedroom, so don't sleep in my courtroom, or something along those lines. Court is in recess until 12:35. Then we got to go back up here. Okay. Here's a new sketch that was released with Richard Allen and Andrew Baldwin. This was a photo provided by Lee Abuska. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that is their name there, highlighted on the screen. All right, moving on. Court continued for the afternoon session at 1:38 p.m. and began with defense attorney Jennifer Auger cross-examining Stacy Bozovsky, a DNA expert for the Indiana State Police. According to News 8's Kyla Russell, Auger began by asking Bozovsky to explain what technology extracts DNA from hair strands without a root. Auger and Bozovsky, that's fun to say over and over and over again. Auger and Bozovsky spoke back and forth about the tech, which the expert said is being expanded and still not in full force. It's only being used for unidentified human remains. What? So it's not being used for this hair strand, okay? Auger asked about strands of hair being held at Bozovsky's lab that have not been tested yet and asserted that the testing should happen now as Richard Allen is on trial and this is potential evidence. Auger also asked if any hair samples from Allen had been submitted. The expert said no. Allen's hairs haven't even been submitted as a what's the word? Like a constant. It's one of the, to as a comparison. Like they don't even have Richard Allen's hair, which first of all is very short, so how to get it? Well, but you can get bodily hair from other places and things like that and get his DNA. So you can get a potential evidence or potential match of, if there were hairs from him on the scene, from his body, not his head, and we could get a DNA profile and determine whether his DNA was actually at the scene or not. But they didn't even bother to do that. So to go back and forth about hair found in Abby's right hand and hair samples from Libby German's sister and grandmother were only tested recently, with Auger mentioning that the number of years that have passed since the homicides. It's been 7 years, and we're just now testing the hair in Abby's hand because they know that it was brought up in the opening statements by the defense. So the state is like, oh crap, I guess we better test that hair. So now we know it's Kelsey's hair. Surprise. Razumnovsky later said the lab did not develop a DNA profile from an unknown male based on the R kits, the SA kits, despite mentioning that they had reason to believe from the case information that was provided that it was a male perpetrator. This means that Richard Allen is included in the profile. What? That doesn't mean anything. It just means that he could be it because they didn't exclude him. Vazovsky said regarding the samples, the majority of results can't determine the amount of people contributing to DNA on the items. Auger then questioned the contamination standards, referring to a black hoodie that was contaminated by a male. The expert said she had no male assistants and no one except her touched the samples during autopsy. So then, how did the uh, male lab tech get his DNA on there? She said she reviewed DNA from items belonging to Richard Allen and said she did not find any connection between Allen and the two girls. She said there was not enough DNA on the unspent cartridge or quote unquote the magic bullet found at the scene to develop a DNA profile for anyone. Following a few questions from prosecution and defense, the jury chimed in with questions about protocol, um, about what protocol was in place in the lab and how evidence is stored. Bosovsky finished testifying at 2:50 p.m. Following testimony from the DNA expert with the Indiana State Police, the state called Major Patrick Cicero to the stand. Cicero is a LaPorte County Sheriff's Major with previous experience as a crime scene investigator. Cicero said his specialty while as a CSI was bloodstains. Cicero explained to the jury how bloodstains work and how investigators look at stains' shape to pull information about the case. He also explained how CSIs can reconstruct scenes. Cicero was asked to develop the Delphi homicides to what did I to develop? I don't even know where that came from. Cicero was asked to assist with the Delphi homicides until February 12th, 2024. So of this year, he just stopped. All right, so he didn't visit the scene until April 4th. The state shared a number of exhibits which showed stains found at the scene and a diagram of where the bodies were found. He pointed out a blood stain on a tree, explaining that it was a transfer stain. So they're trying to say that this F stain, the F tree, it was a transfer from Libby's hand and not a painted on F to make it look like a rune for Odinists. So see how that goes. So he pointed out a blood stain on a tree, explaining it was a transfer stain. Transfer stains are left behind when a bloodied object comes into contact with another. After showing the jury the stains and explaining how CSIs use chemicals to make blood stains stand out, Cicero said all of the stains found at the scene were transfer stains. Cicero then explained the blood stains found on Libby German's body, including a transfer stain on the foot, lightened blood on her face, and blood found on her thighs. Cicero said due to the altered blood patterns, he believes at one point Libby sat straight up but then moved after dying. He also added that blood found on the tree belonged to Libby. So she wasn't found in the same spot in which she died, apparently, because she had to have been moved. Or she moved, is what they're saying, but let's see. So he also added that blood was found on the tree and that blood belonged to Abby. So he said he did not believe Abby Williams was moved after injury. Okay. Williams did not have blood on her hands, so Abby wasn't moved. According to them, Williams did not have blood on her hands, which Cicero said could have been due to her possibly being restrained or unconscious. Maybe restrained, but also maybe they cleaned her hands, which is potentially which is what some people are saying. They go on to their afternoon break, and then court resumes at 4:30. Pat Cicero, a LaPorte County Sheriff's Major with CSI experience, returned to the stand. State Prosecutor James Luttrell began by questioning Cicero about his conclusions about the crime scene and specific details about the bodies. Cicero told the jury he believed Abby Williams was killed while wearing her clothes that she was found in, and said that he wasn't surprised that investigators didn't predate predation of the bodies given the climate and temperature. He added that he believed at least one person took the girls' lives, but couldn't rule out more may have been involved. Defense attorney Jennifer Auger asked Cicero about his conclusions on blood found at the scene, asking him to explain how the blood could have transferred to where it did. Auger asked if the girls could have been lifted, and Cicero said not necessarily, including that her body could have been turned. He mentioned in earlier testimony that Libby's body may have been moved or dragged after her death. So he's like contradicting himself that she was moved or dragged, but then saying that she didn't move or nobody else moved her. I don't know. He confirmed to the court though that at some point Libby German's neck was above her forehead. That is what scares me. I feel like she was hung upside down like the tree on that F tree, the Odin upside down Odin symbol. I have a feeling she was. I mean, they were both sacrificed for that, but she was made to be that character, that Odin. I don't know. I just feel like maybe she was hung upside down from a tree. I don't want to think that, but knowing all the Odinist stuff, and here it says Libby's neck was above her head. Auger noted that it would have been highly appropriate to document any drag marks found at the scene in February 2017. Auger asked Cicero if in all the photographic evidence he reviewed could anything at all, link Richard Allen to the homicides of Libby and Abby, and Cicero said no. So far, everybody that the state has put on has said there is no link from Richard Allen to the girls. We're on day 9, about to go into day 10, which is they're going to bring in the confession tapes and interviews and all that, which is the only way that they can try to get him, which is these confessions that they made him make under severe psychosis while he was in segregated unit with people watching him 24/7 and everyone telling him he did this and he's a child KI double Eller and all that, and away from his family. And I really feel like he was um, tortured, for lack of a better word, in prison. Hold on. All right. All right. Uh, Next, Luttrell redirected, to which Cicero explained his theory that Libby's arm could have been used to pull her body, and that if she was dragged, her head would fall back. Okay. Luttrell then asked if SA could occur without leaving DNA and if Libby's injuries were inflicted at the same time. Cicero said yes to the first question and said the injuries would have been inflicted at different times. How does he know that? What gives him that authority to tell him that? Ajay jumped in, remarking that Cicero had no idea how the blood transfer got on the tree. No, Cicero said, could have been other methods. Yes. You can't rule out that Abby and Libby were taken at the same time, and he says, no, I can't. So again, it's a lot of his information that some of the things that he concluded in his review of the case, I guess, is not 100%. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Things like were their lives taken at the same time? Were the injuries both at the same time? Who was first, Abby, Libby, or where were their bodies? Were they dragged from somewhere? And he can't really answer that. And Richard Allen's DNA is nowhere to be found. So it's just very, very odd. All right, so let's move on to Max Lewis from Fox 59. He's got some good updates. He said this is morning, the morning thread. So Delphi Day 9 morning. Up on the stand today is Stacy Bozanovsky. She is a forensic scientist and DNA analyst at the Indiana State Police Lab. She went through all the swabs and things tested for DNA in the case. Swabs from the girls indicated possible semen, but no semen detected. So, mm, I'll clarify that later. It's more likely that it's seminal fluid and not semen, is what was later, I believe, clarified. So just hold that thought. All right, so male DNA was found on some of the swabs. However, the analyst testified that finding male DNA on some of the areas swabbed was not necessarily unusual, but it is if it's like their vaginal swabs that you're finding male DNA on. We learned that a mysterious hair found in Abby's hand turned out to be that from Libby's sister Kelsey. So Abby, who is wearing Kelsey's sweatshirt, because remember, Kelsey says she lent it to Libby, this like swim team sweatshirt or something. Um, she lent to Libby to wear because she says she dropped him off and just in case it got cold, they were dressed warm, so she gave Libby a sweatshirt and um, that sweatshirt happened to be on Abby. So but she said it was a brand new sweatshirt, brand new, and it was in the back of her car that she just handed her. So why would Kelsey's hair be? I could see possibly, okay, maybe Kelsey's hair was in the sweatshirt, and when putting the sweatshirt on her, a hair got wrapped around her finger or something. But it still just doesn't make sense to me. And it's got a root. I mean, obviously they were able to test it and it was Kelsey's. So, right? I mean, did they do a DNA test? Did they just say it was Kelsey's? Is Kelsey a suspect? I'm just saying. Just saying. All right, so the cartridge found between the girls' bodies was pulled out in court for the first time. Analyst said it appeared slightly dirty. She testified that cartridges are hard to get DNA from because they're so small. DNA on a cartridge was insufficient for further analysis. They went through all the clothing items of the girls and blood spots at the crime scene. Some partial profiles found, but not enough to compare. During a retest, lab thought they found a DNA profile of an unknown male, entered it into CODIS, turned out to be a lab employee. The analyst testified reminder reminder was sent out after that about wearing protective equipment when doing their testing. Like they need to know that they're in a lab doing DNA testing. Some hairs from the scene were sent to the FBI. This I want to know more about because remember, somehow, some way, they kicked the FBI out, off of this case and sent them on their way back home. So why? And how did they have that authority? Why is the FBI not suspicious of all the law enforcement in this area? Some hairs found at the scene were sent to the FBI. The FBI concluded 3 hairs were not consistent with Abby and Libby. There are some new technologies that could test the hairs without a root. However, the lab didn't do it because success rates are low and testing would destroy the sample, supposedly. James Luttrell asked if they found Richard Allen's DNA in any of the items. The answer was no. They didn't find a male DNA profile suitable for comparison. That was the end of direct examination, which took the entire morning. At the end, Judge Gull scolded people for sleeping in the courtroom. She said, I don't conduct court in your bedroom. I would appreciate you not sleeping in my courtroom. Court recessed for lunch. Cross-examination begins in the afternoon. Also, the sketch was released. There were a few more too, so I'll get to it when we get there. All right, so the afternoon wrap up of day 9. Afternoon lunch, defense attorney Jennifer Auger cross-examined the DNA analyst from the Indiana State Police lab. It was revealed that hairs were sent to the FBI. The FBI responded and said if investigators would like them to do a comparison with the 3 hair samples that didn't appear to belong to Abby and Libby, then they could send them possible matches to compare to those samples. None were ever submitted, and the analyst said the decision was made up to investigators. Um, why didn't they send samples? Why didn't they have Richard Allen's hair samples and send that to the lab? Usually they'll take like pubic hair samples, samples maybe from your arm or your leg and your head if you have hair on your head, and maybe some other places, I don't know, but they take samples from multiple spots and you can compare it to the samples that didn't match Abby and Libby and see if they compare at all or exclude him, but they don't want to. And why is that? Because it could possibly exclude Richard Allen. So they probably don't want to risk that. It was also revealed that mystery piece of hair found in Abby's hand belonged to Libby's sister, Kelsey German. That conclusion didn't come until 2 weeks ago because it had never been tested until the defense said, "Hey, by the way, we know about this and we're going to talk about it. This is coming up in our case." So, when asked why it took so long, the analyst said they only focused on the male suspects. So, because it was female hair, you're just like, well, whatever, I don't care. Females can commit homicides too, you know. I mean, let's not be sexist here. Because they determined it was a piece of hair belonging to a female, it didn't need to be tested. Defense attorney Ajay responded by asking the analyst if they know if the perpetrator is male or female. She responded by saying the case notes indicated a male. There was no explanation of how male lab employees' DNA ended up on Libby's sweatshirt. The analyst testified that she was the only one who analyzed the sweatshirt at the lab. So then, should we look at this lab expert or lab analyst, maybe? I mean, could be small town. I don't know. Ajay then asked if any items from Richard Allen's home had DNA connecting him to Abby and Libby. I'm just kidding. I don't really think that the lab analyst had anything to do with the homicides, but I just think it's funny. Like, well, we have no idea how it got there. Well, then, if it didn't get there somehow in the lab, then it got there because maybe he did it. That's the alternative explanation. But maybe say, oh, somehow our protocol got something or other, or I spoke with him and then I did the testing and somehow maybe his I got transferred DNA. Like come up with an explanation better than, well, we just can't tell you how that happened. Ajay then asked if any items from Richard Allen's home had DNA connecting him to Abby and Libby. The answer is no. The jury asked 8 questions, mostly about lab security and if anything could alter DNA. Next up was Major Pat Cicero with the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office. He's a blood spatter expert and a crime scene reconstructionist. He reviewed crime scene photos and went to the crime scene earlier this year to develop theory on how the homicides happened. He did so by looking at the blood spatter patterns and the flow of blood on the bodies. He determined Libby's throat was slashed near a tree and her blood hand hit the tree, leaving a stain on it. Again, they're saying it's transferred from Libby and her hand. Hold on, I'm going to pull up a picture of the F tree. So hold on one second. All right, on the screen, I found um, it's not an actual picture of the F tree, but it is a replica. This here on the screen, where I was just highlighting, that's a replica of what is on the tree, the symbol found on the tree. And then over it, they, this was Court TV that did this rendering. So they gave us the graphic of what the blood stain looks like on the tree, and then they showed us what it looks like with this F rune. And then I put down here the name of the F rune is Fehu or something like that, which stands for cattle, and it symbolizes wealth, cattle, livestock, um, money, in today's terms. uh, Basically, they did this for success, money, in my opinion. This was a ritualistic sacrifice, and this F is part of their runes, one of the runes that they left at the scene. And this expert is saying that it was just transferred from Libby's hand. Yeah. All right. So where were we? I don't remember. Did I say this already? Okay. So up next, Major Pat Cicero. He reviewed the crime scene photos and went to the crime scene earlier this year to develop a theory of how the homicides happened. He did so by looking at the blood spatter patterns and the flow of blood on the bodies. He determined Libby's throat was slashed near a tree and her blood hand hit the tree, leaving a stain on it. He said it appeared that she then fell to the ground, bled out, and then was dragged through her pool of blood to where her body was found. And here is a diagram for reference. So you can see there's blood spots here. This was a blood spot with a pile of sticks on it in this shape, which also looks very rune-like to me. It had blood stains on it. The tree, oh, the blood tree is over here, and then there's more puddles of blood. Here's another tree. This is Libby's body, Abby's body, the branches on them. I can't see what that says here. I'm opening it bigger. I can't see what all of that says. It says blood. Maybe that says Cecil. I'm not really sure. Cecil is the name of. Oh, that's the creek. That says the creek. Creek right here. Then there's the tree there and the tree there. I don't know which is the F tree though, because it doesn't say. I'm assuming it's this one that had the bloodstains on it, because that's what it says, had bloodstains on it, but he's not referring to it as the F tree. Maybe that's where I'm getting confused. But yeah, so these are the branches too. So that's potentially four, including the F tree, that's four different runes, four separate runes that are possibly at this scene. So, the bodies, the shape of the bodies you have to think of too. So the way that Libby's arms are shaped is also part of the rune that they're doing. It might be a combo of runes or it's all together makes one rune, if that makes sense. So it's a little confusing, I know. So let's kind of clarify. Okay, so here I've got Luke Nicholas. He says a green scarf unclaimed by both families was found at the crime scene. So there is a scarf at the scene, and it was not from Libby or Abby. This green scarf was apparently introduced to the scene by third parties. Indiana DNA person did nothing with it. So it's just an object found at the scene that no one's doing anything with, and we're just ignoring. So there's that. And then here, he confirms both Abby and Libby had suspected, I'm going to call it seminal fluid to be correct, on their cervix or their vaginal swabs, according to Indiana DNA expert, per Andrea Burkhart daily readout. This is deeply troubling and suggests both girls could have been ARD, undermining the ME, Dr. Core, and also Wish TV said that there wasn't any fluid, but now we're finding confirmation that there was. So is there or isn't there? It's just all confusing. Here's a clarifier from Andrea Burke. Both Andrea and Kyla are in the courtroom. So I'm just telling you, like, different people report different things, and it's kind of scary. So, clarifier from Andrea Burkhart on this: seminal fluid is confirmed to have been found on both cervixes, but male DNA was not found. So, they found seminal fluid, but not DNA. That makes no sense. But somehow that is what. Oh, okay. So it has to do with the presumptive testing. It wasn't confirmed. It was a presumptive test only. She did not run a confirmatory test, and the subsequent DNA analysis showed no male DNA. So it was just a presumptive test to confirm that it was seminal fluid, but then no DNA was analyzed. The conceivable explanations to me are one, a false positive, or two, a sterile male. So someone who's shooting blanks. Confirmed presumptive. Indiana experts are testing the boundaries of Aristotle's rhetoric. Confirmed presumptive. So yeah, they're trying to say that it was confirmed, but yet it's the presumptive test, which means they didn't do a full analysis on it. They just know, okay, yes, it's consistent with, or it lights up and reacts to, depending on your situation. So like if you were in a room and you did a black light and found seminal fluid on the bedspread or something, you would probably like do a presumptive test then, which is like spraying a chemical, and if it reacts a certain way, then that's a presumptive test. The black light is also a presumptive test, I think. So it's all, kind of presumptive. They're just they don't have all the information. Basically, they haven't gathered it all in order to do what they really should have done, which was test this seminal fluid, test this to try to get some kind of profile and compare it to Richard Allen. If they really believe that Richard Allen is their guy, then wouldn't they be able to find markers that match? I don't know. I'm not an expert in this stuff, but it just something seems really off to me. Am I wrong about this? Dexter, please go sit down. You always walk through my show. Dexter, named after the TV show Dexter. Um, he's a German Shepherd, and he's always hungry. So, anyways, back to what I was saying. I think, this whole thing just feels totally off. The investigation feels off. There's just always something off. And every single expert that's come on the stand so far has said there's no connection between crime scene and Richard Allen. There's no connection between Richard Allen and the girls. So, what are we doing here? 2 years after incarceration. Now we're finally on trial, and it's day 9 of testimony and no connection to this crime whatsoever. It's very, very concerning, very alarming, very scary. Thank you for laying down. Good boy. My gosh, he always wants to eat. Um, so it's just very scary that law enforcement, prosecutors, judges have this much power and can control the narrative, can control what comes into trial, can control all these little things to make an innocent person appear guilty. And in my mind, like I didn't know if he was guilty or not. And I really didn't follow this case until the arrest was made, because then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go back and look at the facts and figure out, did he do it or not? And I still just have not gotten there. And neither has the state so far in their testimony. So I hear day 10 is going to be having his confessions and interviews and things like that coming in soon. So definitely the interviews, the interrogations, I should call them, are going to be coming in video and audio, I believe, for the jurors to view. So it's going to be interesting, and I hope we get a good recap from people that are in the audience or in the gallery that day because I'm very curious to hear what happens in those interrogation tapes because I have a feeling that Holman is very aggressive and trying to push a confession out of him, which he never gives. He holds steady. It isn't until he's incarcerated and on drugs and being possibly abused and tortured in prison when we start getting confessions. So there's that. So I'm going to leave you guys at that. I will see you for day 10. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button on your way out, and I will see you guys later. Bye.